This episode features discussion on PTSD and mental health, content that may be upsetting or triggering to some. Resources have been posted in the bio, and if you don't feel comfortable listening to these topics, then please skip this episode. Welcome back to the Sick of It podcast. Today I spoke to Cherilyn, who is represented by Anya at Champion Health Agency, and we discussed what it's like to suddenly become disabled and to deal with a life-changing accident. Okay, so can you just start by telling us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Cherilyn. I'm 31 years old. I live in sort of halfway between Sydney and Canberra at the moment. I have a wonderful partner who's very supportive, and like his family are amazing, and I've got a really amazing supportive family too. Grew up a bit of everywhere. I had my dad did a job that was the reason why we moved around quite a fair bit, so I didn't really stay put for too long, but I've traveled a bit, and that's probably a quick sum up of myself, really.
And can you tell us about your health journey and like your story?
Yeah, absolutely. So my a high-speed motor vehicle accident in January 2021. It was a single car accident, traveling along a country road approximately about 10 o'clock at night. I had been drinking earlier that day, and so I ended up making our way out to a place called Captain's Flat, where I met up with one of my other friends who was the driver, and it was herself, myself, and a third passenger who was in the back seat, so I was in the front seat, and we were traveling from Captain's Flat. I haven't been told where we were traveling to. It would have either been to Queanbeyan and Canberra way or back to Bungendore way. And so what's happened is we were traveling along Captain's Flat Road, and the car, this is from what the police have told me because I don't remember anything. So the car's veered off the road for approximately 40 metres. We've approached a guardrail. The driver has overcorrected and spun the car completely around at in between 80 to 100 kilometres an hour. The cars hit the guardrail on its side, flipped over a creek, nosedived into a paddock, and rolled several times after that. So, and I ended up being ejected through the windscreen. So, police reports state that I was wearing a seatbelt, but I believe what's happened is it's like this isn't sure. This is just me trying to piece it together. Is I've taken the top part of the seatbelt off, which is something that I would do if I was a passenger because it rubs my neck, which is a stupid excuse, I know, but the damage that was done to like my pelvic area states either the car's landed on me or my seatbelt. That seatbelt there has just completely crushed everything in there, really. So I severed my femoral artery in the accident, which is probably my most we all know that can be fatal quite quickly. Headed off to Canberra Hospital. Like I said, the guy who was in the back seat kept me alive through CPR until the ambulance got there, took me through to Canberra Hospital, and that's where I woke up. So after that, many months in hospital, I was most critical in ICU for 4 weeks, and spent 7 months altogether in hospital before I was able to be let out. Recovery has been really tricky. My brain has tried to keep myself protected. So over this last Christmas break is when quite a post-trauma side has hit in. The reality has become quite real, and it's taken 2 years to get there, but I've just started this sort of post-trauma journey, and it's been quite confronting. So there's no really quick way to say all of that all together, but I hope that gives the idea that you're after.
And so what was the first thing you remember then after the accident?
Oddly enough, the first thing I remember is seeing both my parents, like my mum and dad, standing over the top of me, which is really strange because they hadn't been in the same room for 15 years. So I instantly thought I was having a bad dream or something really bad had happened. And then I realized that I couldn't breathe, and because I had a breathing tube in both my lungs collapsed. So when I started panicking and I went to pull that out, they put me back to sleep. A lot of like nurses and things are quite surprised that I remember that with the drugs that they give you to help you forget.
And if you're okay with it, can you run us through your injuries from the accident?
Sure. So from basically top to toe, really, we'll go, is I broke my left arm. I had both of my lungs collapsed and were filled with like blood and liquid. So I had 2 tubes in either side. My kidneys failed from all the damage. So I was on dialysis. I had a tear to my bowel, so I had to have an emergency colostomy bag put on. And then I had my bladder exploded, so I had to have that rebuilt down right through my urethra. I had tubes in my stomach that would get the urine out of like my stomach cavity where all my organs are, plus a catheter for like that came out through my stomach, plus also I can't remember the names of them now, what they are. Basically I had 3 tubes to get rid of urine. So I snapped the head of my left femur and severed the blood supply to my right femur. I broke, severed the blood supply to my left side. I smashed my pelvis. I had a glass bottle between, like it was a vodka cruiser that I must have been holding between my legs at the time of the accident, which smashed. So I've had damage to quite a fair bit of damage to that area as well. I'm just trying to think of the other ones. I know that the list does go on quite a lot, but they're the ones that I could think of.
What permanent damage symptoms has that caused?
So permanent damage. So I had to have my left leg amputated, and I only have. So it's a really high amputation. So I think I had about less than 10 centimeters of femur left. Permanent damage. So yeah, no left leg, nerve, like chronic nerve pain, phantom limb, so I can still feel it there. My bladder will probably never go back to being quite the same. Everything else with the colostomy reversal, that's been fine. So that goes for physical damage aside from the scarring and all of that, but pain, a lot of pain from I think it's the sacroiliac joint has been screwed into place from where they had to hold my pelvis together for 6 weeks. The pins and screws in my right leg, but the main one has left me as an amputee.
And you were relatively like healthy before this, right? You didn't have any medical issues before?
No, so I've had sort of a couple of the standard things. I've had like my gallbladder removed, appendix removed, that sort of thing. But yeah, no, I was quite unappreciative of life and my health if I was to look back on it now.
So what was that like going from, pretty healthy, normal to suddenly have all these problems, suddenly an amputee?
The first part of it was, I think that I was just on so many medications in hospital that it almost sort of like merged as if it was normal. Like originally I thought I had lost complete feeling from like the waist down, because I couldn't feel my leg, and that took my parents. My mum really struggled with telling me that I had lost my leg. So that was quite something, really. And then my memory sort of starts becoming stronger around March. So it took about 3 months for it to come around, and that was when things were sort of settling in, as in like, okay, I'm in bladder retraining. Like I've woken up on my 30th birthday with a wet bed as opposed to my 29th birthday, which was completely different, obviously. And then learning how everyone said like the recovery part was going to be the hardest process, like rehab and things like that. But my brain just sort of wasn't really with it. It just wasn't real. I kept thinking that I would just wake up. So, but as the reality has come in a lot more stronger now, it's terrifying knowing that it's not coming back and that it's the process. I may get a little emotional just because I have been struggling. I have been really struggling the um, with the fact that it's not coming back, and the way that I will be able to walk again is terrifying. So I've gone through the process of prosthetics, and if I can have a socket prosthetic and my leg is too short, and the way my scarring is, it's just going to be way too painful. So even though I've had my bone grown by an extra 10 centimeters, I'm still not suitable for a socket. So my only option is osseointegration, which is not new, but not a lot of people have heard of it.
And, you know, if there's anything you don't want to talk about, just say, I don't want to talk about it. But yeah, how has that been, like, mentally?
It's been really, really tricky these last. So on Boxing Day, so Christmas Day, not last year, the year before, so my first Christmas after the accident, I wasn't expecting it at all. So I completely moved areas so I could have somewhere that was wheelchair friendly. So I moved about an hour away from my family. So I was driving from, this is just a bit of background on like where the mental stuff started. So I was driving back from my home to my brother's house on Christmas Day, that first Christmas. And like I started having, like the road started moving weird, and like the white lines in the middle of the road were going slower and slower, and I went into like a panic attack to the point where I had to pull over and call my brother to come and get me because I couldn't drive any further. That would have been much too dangerous for not just for myself but for everyone else on the road. So and I feel like it was my because it was one of my last memories, because it's taken so long to regain those memories for the first few weeks before the accident, is that I think it was one of the first memories my mind was having, because I drove to my brother's house for Christmas those few weeks before my accident. So it wasn't on the road I had my accident on, it was just one of the last memories. So there was that one, and that one my anxiety was so bad, my colostomy bag ended up like basically exploding off my body because the stress just basically showed straight through. This just past Christmas Day, I was expecting that again. Nothing. I was completely fine. I was having a great time with my partner's family and him, and we're having a great day. Saw my brother and his partner and my nephews the day before. Expected something weird to happen then. Sorry, I'll correct myself there. Not something weird. It's an episode that but I was okay. And then Boxing Day night, I just kept seeing my mum's face, my dad's face, and my brother's face, and everything was like, oh my God, that time in hospital was all actually real. And that they put all of their lives on hold to be there with me, and that they're still right there for me. And so that it hasn't just affected myself, but it's affected everyone around me, everyone who loves me. And coming to terms with that has been really difficult. And just the fact of looking down, seeing my leg is gone, and that one thing that really gets me, so like I just get emotional because I'm just still learning about it. Like I'm more than happy to talk about it. It just gets a little bit tricky sometimes. So one of the hardest things for me at the moment is because I'm with the person that I want to be with for the rest of my life. And when I look down and see my leg gone, I'm envision myself the way, when you're a young girl, you envision yourself in this beautiful wedding dress, and you walk down the aisle and like you have your dad pass you over. And the reality of that I'm never going to look the same or how I envisioned in that is hard for me to get around. Even though I know there are dresses and ways to do it, and I know it's just a society thing. It's like saying you know, they have such a typical like beauty image that's destroyed people. And it's like, I will look beautiful on my day. I know I will. But getting my head around that part first, and it's all just about learning and different coping mechanisms. So that's been hard. The other thing that's been scaring me mentally at the moment is I can go into an episode and realize that my leg's gone and like all this medical stuff is real. And then I go to look to my partner and I know he looks familiar, but I don't know where from. And that's happened to not just with him, but like my doctor, my physio, my partner, all my partner's family. It hasn't happened to my own immediate family yet, but it's so terrifying that I'm going to get stuck there and forget who they are. But I know that it's just the post-trauma side of things that I will work around and be able to work through.
Yeah, I hope you know that like you are doing amazing. Like this wouldn't be an easy process for anyone. Like overnight, your life changed, and it's always like no matter who you are, it's always going to be adjustment, and it's not going to be something that gets fixed in like a month. Like you're not just going to get over in a month. It's going to take time, and it's going to take years. You know, as you know, obviously, I'm not an amputee, but as someone who's like born with a disability, that's completely different. Like I've never known anything else. But to go from being like healthy to having something so intense happen to you, like that's gonna be an adjustment.
Yeah, and it is the adjustment. Thank you, first of all. Thank you.
That's okay.
The adjustment. Yeah, when you said adjustment, there's my old psychologist was mentioning something about an adjustment disorder, because when I was living with a friend at the time upstairs above her shed, I had a little apartment type thing on her property. So I couldn't move back there. I couldn't live with my mum because she lived on the top floor of an apartment building with no with no elevator. My dad lives on a rural property, so it just wasn't ideal. I wouldn't have been able to get around in my wheelchair there without constant help. So I had to move. I had a bald spot on the back of my head as well from being on my back for so long. So I had to completely cut off all my hair. I relocated an hour away from where I was used to. I pushed my partner away because my partner and I met a few weeks before my accident. So I pushed him away. So I didn't have him. I had myself and my two cats in an apartment, and I think my brain really protected me for quite a long time. And now it's saying, okay, now you're in a position where you've got help and you know you're not scared to ask for help anymore, even though it's, you know, no one likes asking. Well, I don't feel like people like asking for help unless they absolutely have to. And even then, on some levels, it can be like you lose a bit of, I don't know how to put it properly, but from being able to do anything and just so take that for granted, to be able to having to ask for help for basic things. And then I push my body to points where I shouldn't, purely just to try and pretend like nothing's happened. But now that I know that I can reach out for help, and I do have really good support around me, that it's going, okay, I think it's time that we start going through this.
And has it caused any other mental health illnesses like anxiety, PTSD, depression?
Yeah, so I had social anxiety before, and I had I had depression before that was managed, and anxiety when managed when I was younger. But then as I got older, I started to self-medicate. So I have a history of drug and alcohol abuse to myself. So yeah, there was that I was trying to get around. But after I've been, when I was diagnosed with ADHD just when I was 29. So 28. But because of my past, it's taken a long time to be able to get on that right medication. And then I finally got on that right medication, and it's become conflicting with my post-trauma. So yeah, I've got social anxiety, depression, post-trauma, ADHD, and we're looking into the fact of something that it's been long all my life, but only just sort of looking at diagnosing now with OCD.
So you've been doing some work to raise awareness. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah, I do some, and it has been really healing for me too. So I work very closely with a program that run out of the Canberra hospital here, and it's called PARTY. So that stands for Prevention of Alcohol and Risk-Related Trauma in Youth. And so I get to have the opportunity to be their injury ambassador, where we go around to year 10 kids who are about to get their license, and we get to go to their schools. They used to do an in-hospital program, but then COVID came. So one of the trauma leaders, Nardine, she was actually in my family meeting when they were discussing with my family, when they still didn't know that I was going to make it or not. So it's great to be able to work with her, who's known me from the very beginning. And it's so the kids get taught, the young adults get taught CPR, like how to put someone in a position if they feel like they could might have their airways obstructed if they start throwing up from alcohol, or they talk about drugs and what's out there, and how basically how to just be safe. We know that they're going to go off and do these things, but how to be safe about it. And so they get all the information throughout the day, and then I come in with my best friend Dominique, who sits with me, and we talk to the kids about my journey and how I got there, what my life was like before and what my life is like now. And then I sort of interact with them a bit, and I try and get them to guess how fast the car was going, if it was speeding, what we're doing, and what the alcohol reading might have been, or under the influence, it was low reading, mid or high, and all of them basically say 150 high range, or there's only an odd couple that guess the lower ones. And when I tell them that it was the speed limit for that road's 100 kilometers an hour, and the police predict we're doing between 80 and 100, and the fact that the reading from the driver actually came back as a low range reading, everyone's blown away. And Dominique and I can keep, and teachers even come up to me afterwards and they're like, we have never had 100. I went to an all boys school. There's 100 boys, teenage boys, dead silent for an hour while we spoke. So it's that feeling is very, very healing for me, because if I can just help, a few people, like everyone says, if I can just save one person's life, but if I could save everyone's life from it, it's so good to be able to have them sit silent and have them actually engage and listen to what, out of someone who thought it would never happen to me, that it can, and why would I ever think that it can't?
I think that's such a great way to do it. Like I remember in high school when they try to do those type of things, they just have someone stand up and do a presentation, but you don't register it, like you don't pay attention. It's just boring. But to have someone there who's been through it, and just a regular person who wasn't even doing anything that crazy, like they weren't driving that fast, and to see what can happen so quickly and easily, I think that's such a great way for them to actually register it.
Yeah, and the reasoning as to why we sort of veered off the road a bit. Originally, it was thought to be being on the phone, but then being told by police later that it was literally just going to change a song on one of these screens that comes standard with the car that you can touch while driving. And that's I was incredibly intoxicated, so I was apparently dancing around the car, just as most people do when they're having a few drinks. And it all just went very wrong very quickly. But I am also incredibly blessed to still be here, and to have, because I would have lost oxygen to my brain for quite some time, to have reflected as no brain damage. Like, I can be quite independent still, as for what it could have been and how easily it could have been a fatality. I'm incredibly blessed.
And what advice would you give to someone who may be going through a similar thing? Like maybe they suddenly have an illness or a disability. What advice would you give to them?
Oh, there's so many different things I could say. Like, one, I just want to like wrap my hands around you and give you a big hug, because like things will happen out of nowhere. Like grief will hit you out of nowhere. And if you're able to, I use the gym as a good outlet when I'm able to drive. I find that gives me that big independence feeling, as well as I can get a lot of anger out there. So if you're able to try and do something for yourself in a healthy way, or make sure you've got your circle, and don't be scared to ask for help, because the people that love you will do anything they can to help you. And don't ever be scared to reach out and to try and find help, or reach out to someone who you find on social media. Just keep trying and don't give up, because there will be a time where things will be at peace, and don't ever stop trying to find that.
Thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for being so vulnerable and open. I know it's not easy, but it is going to like reach people and impact people.
Thank you.
With you being so open. Where can people find you?
So I just do for this journey, I have an Instagram, which is just at my_1_legged_life. So but I struggle putting stuff out there when I'm going through some down time. So I post as much as I can on there. And if anyone is going through something similar, or feel like they, I do my best to either guide you in a right way once I've spoken to people that actually have a mental health first aid certificate, so I can give the right advice, or I'm just happy to be there to chat. But when I am on, I'm on, but when I'm off, I'm off.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. Don't forget to subscribe to get our episodes every 2 weeks, and to leave a review if you are enjoying the podcast. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter at Sick of It Podcast, and Instagram at sickofit_podcast. I'll talk to you soon.